gas, no? And proceed tayo. Okay. So yan. What are our objectives for today? So our objectives are to be able to write and balance chemical reactions, no? So yan. So alam na natin mag-write ng chemical equations pala, no? Then babalance na lang natin. Then we are going to write chemical reactions or chemical equations from chemical names and vice versa. No? Ito yung mga word problems, no? So ito yung obvious balancing, meaning nung nakalagay na yung formula, ibabalance mo na lang. And the second part will be on the word problems. No? So you will not be given the equation itself, but you are going to create an equation out of the problem. No? So yun. So dalawa yung goal natin and mabilis lang naman to. Okay? So let's review, no? Why do we have chemical equations? Because chemical equations are accompanying equations that describes the two phenomena, no? The physical changes and the chemical changes. No? Okay, so when you say physical changes again, there is a transformation of state of matter, no? So nagbabago kanyang physical appearance. So is, for example, when the molecules go further from each other, pag lumalayo sila sa isa't isa, ano yung nangyayari? Nagkaroon ng transformation of state of matter, no? So it could go from solid to liquid then to gas and vice versa, no? So yan. So we can use chemical equations, no, to describe physical changes, no. For example, ito H2O liquid, tapos magiging gas kunwari yan, magiging water vapor. So yan. So that is one chemical equation describing physical changes. No? So take note na we are indicating the phase of matter dito, no. So pag nakita niyo yung mga ganyan, same formula pa rin, however, nagbago yung kanyang appearance, no, from liquid to gas, then that means physical change lang 'yon. However, when you say chemical changes naman, there are changes in the chemical identity of your matter. Nagbabago yung identity niya. When you say identity, nagbabago yung kanyang chemical formula. No? So let's take for example, the burning of glucose. Kunwari, kumakain kayo ngayon, no? Sana all, no? Mamaya pa ako kakain eh. 6CO2, 6H2O. Okay. So for example, the glucose you take into your body, they will be then converted to carbon dioxide and water molecules, no? In a process called cellular respiration. So after doing glycolysis, Krebs cycle, electron transport chain, yung glucose nyo from your food, no, from the carbohydrates you eat, magiging carbon dioxide and water lang din. So as you can see, these chemical compounds are distinct from one another. No? So magkakaiba sila. Si carbon dioxide, iba yung properties niyan with glucose. Si oxygen, iba yung properties niya with water, so on and so forth. No? So what happens in chemical reactions is that nagbabago yung kanilang chemical identity. No? So when you say nagbabago yung chemical identity, nagbabago yung chemical formulas. No? Because we are creating different molecules out of what we have. No? So yan. Okay, so usually, yun nga. So the two processes are described by what we call chemical equations. No? So ito yung typical chemical equation. Ito yung mga terms. So, ayan. So isa-isahin natin yan. So, this is our generic chemical equation, no? Which is balance. No? So, we have here the left side, which we call the reactant side, and the right side, which we call the product side. No? So, ano na yun? That's fixed na, no? Fixed na yung ganun, standard. Pag nasa left reactant, pag nasa right products. No? Then we have in between them the reaction arrow. Okay, so yung reactants natin, these are the chemical substances that are used up in chemical reactions. Sila yung nagagamit, no, to produce the products. So the products are the substances produced after the chemical reaction. Then the reaction arrow, this tells us about the direction. Usually, the reaction arrow is always pointing to the right side. No? It is always going towards the product side. However, zoom in natin muna to. However, Other than the single-headed arrow, we can also have a double-headed arrow, which we call the equilibrium arrow. Kung titignan nyo yung arrow, may papunta sa right, may papunta sa left. No? So there are two directions in which your reaction can occur. No? So it could proceed to the product side or proceed to the left side. So what do we mean by that? No? Let's assume na kunwari ito ay equilibrium reaction. No? So what we mean by equilibrium reactions is that the reactants will turn into products, no? As usual. However, the products may also produce the reactants, no? So ganun yung nangyayari with equilibrium arrows, no? So we have two directions sa chemical reaction, no? So we have the direction going from reactant to product and product to reactant. So ganun yung move ng um, reaction. Yun yung direction ng reaction if we have an equilibrium arrow. And we will discuss this further, no, sa inyong analytical chemistry, no, which is next semester. Hopefully, face-to-face na yun, no. Kasi, mas maganda na face-to-face yun kasi may analytical chem yun eh. Okay. So, yan. So, this will be discussed in depth in your analytical chemistry, no. So, I don't know if ako pa rin yung teacher niya nun, no. But anyway, so yun, we have the reactant, we have the products, and the reaction arrow. It could be a single-headed arrow pointing to products or a double-headed equilibrium arrow. No? So yan. Then, what we have here is that in our reactants and our products, we see chemical formulas. So chemical formulas indicates us the molecules present in our reaction, no? And then with the chemical formulas are the subscripts, no? In subscripts, these are the innate number of atoms in your molecules, no? When I say innate, fixed yan, no? So let's say carbon dioxide, 2 talaga yung subscript ng oxygen. Water, 2 talaga yung subscript ng hydrogen. For propane, 3 ang subscript ng carbon, 8 yung subscript ni hydrogen. So with that, no, with that idea, meaning lang nun is that yung subscripts natin ay fixed, no. We will never change the subscripts when we balance chemical equations because with different subscripts, no, we are pertaining to different types of compounds. Now, remember the law of definite proportion, no? Andun yun sa clause ni John Dalton in his atomic theory, no? So, sabi sa law of definite proportion that different compounds, teka lang. Nag-charge na ba siya? Sana okay lang siya. Ay, nag-charge naman. Okay, so, ano yung alaw dito? Nawala ako. Ayan, so sabi ni John Dalton, no, it is one of his postulates in his atomic theory that different substances have different proportions, no. The law of definite or the law of multiple proportions lang yun. So that means we are not allowed to change the subscripts because if you change the subscripts, you are pertaining to different molecules. Hindi na sila yung pinapatukuyan ng ating equation, na. So we will never change the subscripts, no. So, ano pwede gawin natin to balance them? We can introduce coefficients or stoichiometric coefficients. No? So, same term lang yan. No? So, when they say coefficients, these are the numbers on the left side of your chemical formula. Ito yung binabago-bago natin. And this tells us about the correct proportion of our substances in order for them to balance out. No? So, it serves as a multiplier. No? Parang sa algebra lang. No? Your coefficients are multipliers. No? Nari, if you have 3x, that means 3x meron ka na. Ang dami naman nun. No? Basta yun yung idea. No? So, yan. So, those are your coefficients. No? And then, lastly, we have the states of matter. No? So, sometimes they are included. Sometimes they are not. No? Depending on the case, no? So, when we say state of matter, makikita nyo lang yan as, apat lang yan, no? So, it could be S, solid, it could be L, liquid, it could be G, gas, or it could be AQ or AQs, no, or aqueous. Depende sa pagka-pronounce, both are acceptable naman, no. So yun. So iba-iba yung states of matter depending on the case, no. So yan. So minsan nilalagay yan, minsan hindi na, no. Okay, so no big deal naman masyado yan, no. So yan. Okay, so that's our chemical equation. So I know you're all familiar with that, no? Okay, so balik ulit tayo sa balancing chemical equation. Why do we have to balance them? Okay, so the reason why we have to balance our chemical equations is that according to Dalton's atomic theory, yung law of conservation of mass, andun, di ba? In the fourth postulate, sabi niya doon that matter cannot be created nor destroyed. So that means in every chemical reaction, there should be no excess nor lackness of atoms. No? Hindi pwedeng sumobra yung atoms, hindi pwedeng kumulang. So that means the number of atoms you have in your reactant should be equal to the number of atoms you have in the product side. No? So hindi dapat hindi dapat kulang, hindi pwedeng sobra. Okay? Kasi yun yung sabi ng law of conservation of mass. No? Okay? So yeah, so that means that we have to balance them. And then again, let me reiterate lang, when we balance, we do not change the coefficient, we do not change the subscripts, no? Rather, we change the coefficients. No? Okay, so we change the multipliers. Okay, so yun lang yung gusto ko sabihin dyan. No? So these are the generic steps. No? Alam nyo na to. So paano ginagawa yung generic balancing? No? So number one, we identify the reactants, the products, and they make sure that they have the correct formula. Kasi if you have incorrect formulas, then mali yung magiging sagot mo. Kahit gaano ka man ka-effort mag-solve, magiging mali yan. No? So you should be able to know the rules in naming your substances. No? So yun. Alam ko tapos nyo na siguro yun. No? Okay, so yun, you should be able to have your correct formulas. No? Double check nyo kung tama yung mga formula. Then number two, you count the number of atoms. No? You identify the atoms present on the reactant and the product, then you count them. Usually we tabulate them, diba? So okay lang yan. Okay, then we balance the element that appears only once in chemical equation. So meaning yan, we balance one at a time na yung elements. No? Then if polyatomic ions exist, mas madali daw sila i-balance by just looking at their subscript. No? So we'll look into this mamaya. No? Then lastly, we add the coefficients and we check kung tama na yung number of atoms. No? So we distribute the coefficients. No? We multiply the coefficients to the number of the atoms so we can get the total number of atoms present, no, in the reactant and the product side. No? So punta muna tayo sa generic way. No? So tatlo kasi yung tips na ibibigay ko sa inyo dito. So generic muna tayo. So let's have this equation. We have carbon plus oxygen gas producing carbon monoxide. No? So usually what we do here is that we create tables, no, listing all the atoms and the number of atoms present. So we have one. Ayan. Bumisita lang yung pusa. Okay, so we have here one carbon on the reactant side and one carbon on the product side. We have two oxygens on the reactant side and one oxygen on the product side now. So how do we usually balance this, no? So usually mga odd numbers, ginagawa nating even numbers, no? So we multiply them by 2. Ganun yung usual technique, diba? Okay, so unang ginawa dyan, we balance out the oxygens first, no? So by balancing the oxygens, ano nangyari? So, diba kanina 2 and 1 yan? So what we did this time is that we balance the oxygens by introducing a coefficient to carbon monoxide. No? We multiplied the number of carbon monoxide atoms by 2. No? So yan. So naging 2s na sila. And then, eventually, we are going to balance the carbons kasi hindi na sila balance. No? So, balance na yung oxygen but the carbons are not balanced. No? So, to balance carbon, you just introduce a coefficient to carbon. No? So, yan. So, balance na siya. So, ganun yung generic, di ba? then mapapansin nyo that yung odd numbers nga na atoms, ginagawa nating even numbers. No? Usually. So, mapapansin nyo yan. Kung hindi nyo nanonotice yon, ako sinasabi ko na sa inyo na usually even numbers yung number of atoms dito. Okay? Of course, in the lowest term, yung ating coefficients na. Ito yung unang technique na ituturo ko sa inyo. No? Alternate method. No? So, yung coefficients kasi natin, they are not limited to integers. When you say integers, whole numbers. No? So, that means our coefficients could be a fraction din. No? As long as rational number yan, pwede gamitin yan. Siyempre, hindi ka pwede gumamit ng irrational number as coefficient. No? Hindi ka pwede maglagay ng pi dito. Okay, pi, carbon, ayun, 3.1415, no? So, walang ganun, no? So, as long as rational yung number mo, meaning it could be expressed in fractions, yun. So, pwede siya ilagay dyan. So, yan na. So, unang technique, we can use fractions, no? To balance this equation. Zoom in tayo dito. So, let's take a look. Kung titignan nyo, the carbons are already balanced. Yung oxygen, hindi na lang. Pero, instead of multiplying this by 2, ito at ito by 2, pwede kong gawin ay, yung oxygen na lang yung i-adjust ko. Itong O2. Usually, we introduce fractions kay O2 eh. Okay. So, paano ko kaya ibabalance itong O2 na to? Kasi tignan mo, I have 2 atoms on the reactant and 1 atom on the product side. What number should I multiply sa 2 para maging 1? Ano kaya i-multiply ko dito para maging equal siya sa 1? Ano i-multiply ko dyan? Edi, 1/2. If I multiply the 2 oxygens by 1/2, maging equal na lang yan sa 1. No? Magka-cancel yung 2's. No? So that means I have to place a 1/2 coefficient for O2. Okay? So by doing that, balance na yung equation ko. No? So yan. So pwede yan. So, napansin natin, we just adjusted one formula. Yun lang yung nilagyan natin ng coefficient. Then, we ended up with a balanced equation. Okay, so balance na yan. Okay, so, pwede yan na, yung mga ganong technique. Usually, we place the fractions besides the oxygen atom, oxygen molecule. No? So, yan. Message yung Shopee. Pero yun na, so ganun lang. You can use fractions. So, yan, isang technique yan na you should develop na. Pero if you already know this, then good na. So, yan. Kasi yung senior high school ko, ito tinuturo ko sa kanila na fractions na lang sila. Nag-enjoy naman sila. No? So, yan. So, by introducing fractional coefficients, we can balance the atoms accordingly. No? So, yan. Kung nga gusto mo yung even number, maging odd number, yun, use fraction. Kung gusto mo yung odd number, maging even number, use fractions. Pwede yan na. So, usually, nasa denominator yung number of atoms nyo. No? Kunwari, you have 2 atoms here. Ang nilalagay mo sa denominator are yung 2. No? So, ganun usually yung process niya. Tsaka, the reason why I introduce this to my kids, na mga senior high ko, is for them not to be afraid of fractions. Kasi, ang daming taong takot sa fraction eh. I was one of that. Isa ako dun sa mga taong yun. Pero, eventually, tinanggap ko na lang na fractions are useful at all. Music na tayo. Ayan. Okay, so ganun lang. We can use fractions para i-balance yung equation natin. No? So, for example, kunwari gusto ng question ay, I want whole number answers. No? Kunwari, yung problem, sabi dun sa canvas na nakalagay, express the answers in whole numbers or express the integer coefficients. So, when we say integer coefficient, kailangan gawing whole number. So, dapat walang fraction. Kunwari lang ha. So, kunwari gusto ko ng fractions. So, gusto ko walang fraction sa problem. So, ang gagawin ko na lang is that similar to algebraic expressions, no? Ano ginagawa natin para mawala yung fractions? Di ba, minumultiply natin yung entire equation. So, kunwari, I want to remove the fraction in this equation, I can multiply the entire equation by 2. Mumultiply ko siya sa denominator para matanggal yung fraction. So, as you can see, we still ended up with the same answer. Parang kanina lang na. Okay. So, sir, ano gusto mo? May fraction, walang fraction? Depende sa problem. Okay. Pero usually nga, ang hinahanap sa mga questions, no, especially sa mga quizzes, ay yung walang fraction. And then, sir, bakit pa tayo nag-fraction? No? Mamaya, makikita niyo yung importance niya. No? So, yan. Basta yun yung unang tip. No? You can use fractions. Then, to remove fractions, you just multiply the entire equation by the denominator of the fraction. Ito pa question sa akin yesterday. Sir, is it possible that we have 1/2 here, tapos may 1/3 doon, so on and so forth? Pwede. Pero, ako, hindi ako gumagamit nun. No? I don't want to complicate things. No? Usually, isang fraction lang nakikita natin. No? Usually, 1/2, 3/2, 5/2, mga ganun-ganun lang. No? So, yun. So, hindi ko na i-complicate yung buhay natin. No? So, ganun lang. Simple lang tayo. Isa lang yung may fraction usually. Okay? So, that's the first technique that you can use. Use fractions. No? Then, ito yung second technique. No? So, recognize your equations. No? When you're balancing equations, wag ka magbilang-bilang lang agad. No? You should recognize the type of chemical equation that you have. No? So, marami kasing uri ng chemical equations depending on the type of chemical reaction present. We could have combustion reactions, we could have redox reactions, you can have ano pa ba yung mga types of reaction, precipitation reactions, acid-base reactions, so on and so forth. No? So by this time, you should be able to recognize the type of reaction you have. No? For example, this. No? This equation shown is a combustion reaction. Combustion yan na. Ano yung format ng combustion reaction? Usually, you begin with a compound na CHO ang format. May carbon, may hydrogen, then sometimes may oxygen. So ganito yung format ng combustion reaction. May CHO ka here, though oxygen is optional. No? Minsan meron, minsan wala. Pero usually may CH. No? Ay, teka lang. May call lang. Wait lang ha. Wait lang po. Wait lang. Ayun, no. Pasensya na. Ay, daming Okay, so yun. So anyway, yun, you should be able to recognize yung type of equation. No? So, usually in our combustion reaction, you have CHO, no? Ito yung CHO nyo. Then you have your oxygen gas here. Always ganyan yung format na. And then product nyo ay CO2 and H2O. So ito yung format niya. So you should be able to recognize your equations. No? Kailangan alam niyo yung format. No? So when you encounter combustion reactions, ganito yung technique dito. No? So yun, you count the number of atoms, pero ito yung general technique no, in balancing this type of equation. So ito yung special steps. Number one, you balance the carbons first. No? So you balance the carbons in the product side. No? That means you count the number of carbons in your reactant side, then you balance yung nasa product side. No? After balancing the carbons, sunod si hydrogens. No? So, ano yung gagawin mo sa hydrogens? So, balance them. You count the number of hydrogens in your reactant side, then you balance the hydrogens in the product side. Then, after balancing carbons and hydrogen, yung oxygen na yung susunod na. Kaya kung mapapansin nyo, yung format niya, CHO. Kasi ganun yung sequence ng pagbalance. Carbon muna, then hydrogen, then lastly, oxygen. Kaya CHO yung format niya na. So, ganun yung pagbalance. No? So, carbon muna, then hydrogens, then oxygens. Okay, so when balancing oxygens naman, instead of counting the atoms on the reactant side, you will count the atoms on the product side. No? So, bilangin mo yung oxygen atoms sa product side. Then, you balance the oxygen atom on the reactant side. No? So, ganun lang. So, kuha tayong example. So, ito nga, no? So, sabi natin, we have to balance the carbons first, no? Because this is a combustion reaction. So, balance muna natin yung carbon. So, we have 4 carbons here. We have 1 carbon here in the form of carbon dioxide. So, I am going to multiply carbon dioxide by 4. No? Yan, mag-balance na yung carbons. Then, ano sunod? Yung hydrogen. We have 10 hydrogens here. We have 2 hydrogens here. So, the multiplier should be 5. Okay? So, yan. 5 yan. So, para maging 10 yung hydrogens. Then, lastly, ito. Pag nabalance nyo na yung carbon, then yung hydrogen, you begin counting the oxygen atoms in the product side. No? So, tingin ka sa product side. Ilang oxygens meron ka? So, you have 4 times 2 oxygens. So, ayan, no? So, this is 2 oxygen times 4. Again, you multiply the subscript by the coefficient. No? So, you have 2 oxygens here times 4. So, that's 8 plus 1 oxygen here times 5. So, 5 yon. So, that's 8 plus 5, 13. No? So, ayan. So, ganito. So, if you have 13 oxygens here, and you have 2 oxygens here, ano yung multiply sa 2 para maging 13? What number you should multiply dito sa 2 para maging 13? Ano kaya number yon? E di pwedeng 13 halves, no? Pwedeng 13 over 2 kasi pwedeng mag-cancel yung 2 and you will be left with 13, no? So, 13 halves yung magiging coefficient ng oxygen, no? So, ganun yung case, ha? Again, kunwari, 13 to, tas ito, even number. Odd number to, even number to. Tas gusto mo gawing odd, no? Para mag-balance sila. You have to use fractions, no? So, yan. 13 over 2. 13. Balance na yan. Okay? So, ganun ha. Ayan. Okay? So, you can use fractions. Dito talaga nagagamit yung fraction sa combustion reaction, no? So, usually, the oxygen will bear the fractional coefficient, no? So, ayan. No? So, ayan. So, that's one shortcut, ha? So, again, how to balance combustion reactions. You count the carbons first, then you balance them. Count the carbons on the reactant, balance the carbons on the product. Then, hydrogens, no? Count the hydrogens in the reactant side, then balance the hydrogens on the product side. Then eventually, count the oxygens on the product side. Then you balance the oxygen on the reactant side. No? Usually, may fraction talaga yan. No? Minsan may fraction, minsan wala. No? Pero ganun. No? Yung number of oxygen sa products, titignan mo, then ibabalance mo yun na sa reactant. No? So that means kung 13 to, there should be 13 oxygens as well in your reactant side. No? So yan. So that's 2 times 13 halves equal to 13. Okay. So, ganun lang. Ganun lang kasimple yung pag-balance dyan, no? And, tumatawag na naman siya. Wait lang, guys, ha? Makukulit yung mga delivery ngayon. Wait lang po. Wait lang, guys, ha? Ayun. Galing sa bank eh. Kaya, kailangan ko mag-receive. So, anyway, so ganun yung pag-balance na. So, ano yung susunod natin? So, for example, you don't want fractions. Sabi ng problem, express the integer coefficient. So, ano lang gagawin mo? So, if you want to remove the fraction in your equation, you have to multiply it by the denominator. Okay? So, para mag-cancel yung fraction, multiply mo lang yan lahat sa 2. So, you will end up with another balanced equation. Okay? So, yan. So, you can check the number of atoms manually. So, okay na bahala dyan, na. So, ganun lang yung pag-balance ng CHOs, yung ating mga combustion reaction. Okay? So, ganun lang. Okay. So, ito yung third technique. No? So, ano yung first technique natin? You can use fractions. Second technique, yung combustion reaction. So, paano yung combustion reaction? Carbons muna, then hydrogens, then lastly, oxygens. So, yan. Dalawang technique. Ito na yung last technique na i-share ko sa inyo. Okay. So, this is the last technique. Usually, pag nakikita to ng bata, natatakot sila. Usually, ganun na. Reaction nila, hala, ano ba yan? No? Pero ganito, easy lang to. Sabi ko kanina, di ba, you have to recognize polyatomic ions, no? So when you say recognize polyatomic ions, you check the formula, no? Ano yung similar sa reactant at sa product side? Ano yung, saan sila magkapareha, no? So tignan natin. Kung mapapansin nyo, may SO3 sa reactant, may SO3 din sa product. So ibig sabihin nun, polyatomic ion yung SO3, di ba? Sulfite yon. Ano pa yung similar sa reactant and product? Ayan, PO4. So, mapapansin natin. So, yung SO3 ay, ano? Ang SO3 ay parehas sa reactant and the product side. Ang PO4 ay parehas sa reactant and the product side na. So, yun yung sinasabi ko, when you recognize polyatomics, you check kung ano yung similar equation sa reactant and product side, okay? So, yun. So, that's one way. No? So, recognize nyo muna na may polyatomics. Pag meron, ano gagawin? So, ito yung susunod na gagawin. You count the number of those polyatomic ions you have. No? Bilangin mo kung ilang polyatomic ions meron ka. No? So, look here. Meron tayong isang SO3 on the reactant side. Tapos, meron tayong isang SO3 on the product side. May isa tayong PO4 on the reactant side, and we have one PO4 din sa product side. No? So, kapag equal yung number of polyatomic ions mo, meaning parehas silang 1, or parehas silang 2, as long as parehas sila, no? ano gagawin mo? You set them aside. Okay. So, pag balance na sila, pag balance yung iyong polyatomics, isa-set aside mo sila. Meaning nun, hindi mo sila papansinin. Ganun ha. Pag balance na yan, wag mo muna pansinin. So, you set them aside. Pwede takpan mo muna. Pero wag buburahin na. Kung binubura ko lang para matakpan. Okay? So, yun yung purpose. No? So, pag nakita nyo yung balance yan, we have 1 SO3 here, 1 SO3 there, 1 PO4 here, 1 PO4 there. Pag balance yon, set aside. No? Wag mo muna pansinin. Ano yung ibabalance mo? Ibabalance mo ngayon itong mga natira. Itong Na, itong H, itong H, itong Na. Okay? So, ganun yung technique, ha? So, you set aside the polyatomics, then you balance the remaining atoms. No? You're going to balance sodium and hydrogens now. Balance natin yung sodium and hydrogen. Okay. So, let's take a look at sodium. So, on the reactant side, we have 2 sodium atoms here. On the product side, we have 3 sodium atoms. No? So, what would be the best multiple? Ay, nangyari. Ano nangyari dun? Okay, so anyway. So, ayan, no? Ano yung best multiple ng 2 and 3? FD yun 6, no? Kasi 2 times 3 is 6. No? So, that means, gagawin natin 6 yung number of sodium atoms, no? So, itong 2, para maging 6 yan, you multiply it by 3. Itong 3, para maging 6 yan, you multiply it by 2. No? Okay, so that means the coefficient of this term is 3. Dito naman ay 2. Okay. H3, H2. Tatlong H, dalawang H. So, ganun din, no? Ang common multiple nila ay 6. So, itong 3, i-multiply natin sa 2. So, let's multiply it by 2. Then, yung 2, i-multiply natin sa 3. Okay? So, ganun ha. So, ano yung technique na shinare ko sa inyo? If you have polyatomics, wag mo na sila pansinin. Pag-balance sila. No? Kunwari, balance yan. Isa dito, isa doon, isa dito, isa doon. Set aside mo. Ang ibabalance mo ay yung natira. Okay, by doing that, tapos na. Balance na yan. Okay? So, ganun yan. Okay? Yan. So, balance na yan. Okay, if you want to check, you may count the atoms. No? Count mo uli yung mga atoms dyan. No? So, yan. So, makikita nyo, you have 6 sodium here, you have 6 sodium here, sulfur. Okay, isa-isa na to kino-confirm natin kung balance na talaga. No? So, you have 1 times 3 sulfur here. So, tatlong sulfur. 1 times 3 sulfur here. So, tatlo ring sulfur there. No? Then, oxygen, we have 3 times 3, 9, plus, this is 4 times 2, 8, no? So, 9 plus 8, 17 yan, di ba? So, 17 oxygens. So, ganun din dito, we have 3 times 3, 9, plus 4 times 2, 8, 17 oxygens then on the product side, no? Hydrogens, we have 2 and 3, so 6 yan. Then, 3 and 2, 6 din yan. Then, phosphorus, that's 1 phosphorus times 2, 1 phosphorus times 2. So, tig-dalawa. Okay? So, as you can see, as long as your polyatomics are balanced, no, madali na lang yung balancing ng natira, no? So, yun yung last technique na i-share ko sa inyo, ha? So, yan. Again, recognize the polyatomics. Then, if they are balanced, you set them aside. You balance the remaining atoms na lang, yung mga natira. Okay? So, yan. So, by doing that, balance the entire equation. Okay? So, yun yung quick step. Ayun. So, sana makuha nyo yung idea. Kunwari may question. Sir, paano po paano pag hindi balance yung coefficients? So, if in case na hindi balance yung coefficients nyo, you have to balance them. Kunwari, tatlo yung SO3 dito, isa lang. So, you multiply yung tatlong SO3 dito. I-multiply mo ito by 3 para maging equal sila. So, later we have an example about this now. Okay, so yun yung mga techniques na gusto kong i-share. No? So, it could be, I don't know if you're still intimidated pa rin kayo sa balancing, pero college na tayo, dapat mas gamay na natin siya. So, ano yung mga techniques natin? Technique number 1, you can use fractions. So, as long as you know how to do the techniques, no, magiging madali na lang lahat in the future. So, you use fractions, then for CHO, ano yung binabalance? Carbon first, hydrogens then, lastly, oxygen. So, ganyan yung pagbalance. Pag may nakita kang CH or O or combustion reaction, you do this, no? So, yan. Ito yung mga ibabalance mo. Carbon muna, then hydrogen, then oxygens. Okay? Third one. Ano yun? Yung polyatomics. Okay, mga polyatomic ions nyo. No? So, polyatomics tawag ko doon. So, you recognize kung may polyatomics. If balance sila, then you balance the remaining atoms na lang. If they are not balanced, then ibabalance mo muna sila. So, later on, we'll have examples on that na. Okay? So, ayan na. So, example tayo. Okay, so let's answer all these 8 items. No? 8 items ba? Hindi. Ganito na lang. May sasagot ako ng 4 items dito. Kayo bahala sa remaining 4. And I will leave that as your, take-home activity na lang. Nasa bahay naman kayo, no? So, parang activity nyo na lang on your own. Bakit, no? Kasi, if you take a look at the PowerPoint, no? Pag tinignan nyo yung notes, nilagay ko na lahat ng sagot dito. Okay, may sagot na dyan. May sagot na rin dito. Even sa stoichiometry, I presented my complete solutions here. No? So, ayan yung mga sagot. So, all you have to do is, para mag-review kayo, i-download na lang yung PowerPoint. No? So, yan. Nilagay ko yung mga solutions dito. So, okay. So, yan. So, I will leave these items to you to practice now. Ayan na. Di ba? May mga answers na. Okay? So, yun lang. So, yung mga hindi ko sasagutan lahat I believe the others for you to practice. If you want to check your answer, tingin lang kayo dito sa solutions na nasa PowerPoint. No? So, download the PowerPoint na sa Canvas lang to. So, just go to your modules, no? Canvas. Punta kayo module. Punta kayo modules, then laboratory chapter 4. So yan, download nyo yung PowerPoint na to, balancing equations and stoichiometry. Tapos, once you open your PowerPoint, click nyo yung notes, lalabas yung answers sa questions. Okay? So ganun lang. Okay, so I will answer some items here para ma-strengthen natin yung idea about the techniques that I presented you, no? Do we have to use the technique always? Not really, no? Hindi naman parate, no? Minsan kailangan gamitin, minsan hindi, no? So, depending on the case, no? If you could recognize polyatomic ion, then you can use the technique. If you can recognize a combustion reaction, then use the technique, no? Pero kung wala kang ma-recognize na polyatomics or combustion, traditional method ka, no? So, yun, wala talagang technique doon. Manual yun. So, usually, pag ganun, you balance them from left to right, no? So, ganun. And usually, oxygen yung last na binabalance, no? So, I will answer some representative questions here, no? Meaning yung mga, makikita nyo yung mga techniques and yung traditional, no? So, I will answer items 2, 3, 5, and 8. Okay? So, ito yung aking representative items, no? So, that means yung natira, kayo na bahala dyan, no? So, practicean nyo na lang. And nasa PowerPoint na naman yung answers, no? Also, may nakalimutan pala ako i-share sa inyo. Alam ko nag-notif to sa inyo yesterday, no? So, I uploaded the worksheet, no? Kagabi. Kagabi ba? O, kahapon, tanghali, no? So, yan. So, ito yung mga worksheet na pwede nyo sagutan. Okay? So, you may answer this, you may not. Kayo bahala. No? Pwede nyo i-upload dito sa discussions yung answer nyo, just like what we do sa ibang activities natin. So, yan na. So, para mas strengthened kayo, no? So, again, free naman kayo kung gusto niyo sagutan siya or hindi, no? So, nasa side nyo na yon kung gagawin nyo. But again, if you are given the opportunity to practice, grab that opportunity. Malapit na kasi yung midterm, no? So, yan. Kung kailangan mag-exercise, mag-exercise na. Okay? Ay, ba't lumiit yung screen? Teka lang. Buksan ko na lang ulit. Ay. Okay, so mag-answer tayo ng representative questions. Yun. Okay, so anong slide yan? Ito. Okay, so again, 2, 3, 5, 8. So 2, 3, 5, 8 yung sasagutan ko. Okay, so I'll begin with number 2. Kopyahin ko lang. Okay, so yan. C2H6, that's ethane plus oxygen gas producing carbon dioxide and water. Okay, so let's balance this. So, as you can see, the format of the equation is combustion reaction. No? Combustion reaction yung format niya. You have the CHO, CH, no? So yung oxygen, then carbon dioxide and water. So yan. So this is a combustion reaction. So how do you balance combustion reactions ulit? You balance the carbons first, then hydrogens, then lastly oxygens. Okay. So let's balance carbons. No? So dalawang carbon here. On the product side, we have one carbon. Itong nasa CO2, isa lang, di ba? So to make them equal, I will introduce a coefficient 2. No? So yan. So i-multiply ko to by 2 para mag-balance sila. Balance na yung carbon. Next one is hydrogens. We have 6 hydrogens here. We have 2 hydrogens here. Okay, so to balance them, I will place a coefficient 3 sa water. So 6 na yung hydrogens ko. Balance na yung hydrogens. Ano pa? Oxygens na lang. No? So balance na yung carbon. Balance na yung hydrogens. Oxygens na lang. So let's count the oxygen. No? So on the product side, we have 2 times 2, no? Plus 3. No? So ito yung 2 times 2 plus 3. 3 times 1 yan eh. So 3 lang din, di ba? So ilan to? 4 plus 3 is 7. On the product side, we have 7 oxygen atoms now. So on the reactant side, we only have 2. Ito yung question. Ano yung number? What is the number that I will multiply to 2 para maging 7? So ano yung multiply ko sa 2 for it to be equal to 7? Ano kaya? Fraction yon. Edi 7 halves. No? Okay, so 7 halves. You cancel the 2's. You end up with 7. So balance na yung oxygen atoms. No? So 7 over 2. So balance na yan. No? So if you want to check, you can create a table. No? So create tayo ng table. Carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, reactant, product. Bilangin natin ha. So we have 2 carbons here, 2 carbons there. So balance yon. We have 6 hydrogens here. 3 times 2 hydrogens. So 6 then. Then lastly, oxygen. 7 halves times 2, 7. 7 over 2 times 2, 7. Then ilan dito? Yan, 2 times 2 plus 3, 7 din, di ba? Yan, so balance na yan. No? Balance. Okay, so that's balance already. Yan, tapos na yung problema. For example, I want my answer in integer form, no? Meaning ayoko ng fraction. If you want to remove the fractions, all you have to do is to multiply the entire equation by 2. Okay, kunwari gusto nyo tanggalin yung fraction, you want whole numbers instead, no? So you can multiply the equation by 2. So what will happen, makakancel yung denominator, no? So ano yung magiging final answer natin? We have 2 C2H6 plus 7O2 producing 2, sinulat ko na 2CO2 and hindi pala 2. Minultiply ko nga pala sa 2. 4 na yan, 4. And ito 6 na. Nakalimutan ko. 6H2O. Okay? So, ganyan yung magiging final answer if you don't want fractions. Kunwari lang, gusto ng problem, integer. So, you have to remove the fraction. No? You can eliminate the fraction by multiplying the entire equation by the denominator. No? So, multiply mo lang siya by 2. Yan. So, balance na yan. Okay, so 2 ethane, 7 oxygen, 4 carbon dioxide, 6 H2O. So, hindi na ako magka-count ulit kasi basically I just multiplied everything by 2. So, balance na yan. Okay? So, that's the yan yung use ng technique natin. So, yan, balancing combustion reactions. Kung alam nyo na yan, edi better. Pag hindi pa, ngayon lang na-discover, ayan siya. So, gamitin ng maigi na lang. Okay? So, lagay ko yung answer dito. Although nasa PowerPoint na yon, download nyo na lang after the class. Maga naman tayo mag-dismiss, don't worry. Okay, so let's have the next question. Ayan. So, sige. So, let's have the second question. We have sodium hydroxide reacting with sulfuric acid to produce sodium sulfate and water. And so, kailan alam niyo na yung names nila, ha? Okay. So, sige. Ano gagawin natin? Ang daming atoms eh. So, pag maraming atoms dyan, you start to see if there are recurring equations. Meaning may nauulit sa equations. So, tignan nyo. Ano yung similar sa reactants at sa product? Parehas silang may SO4. Okay? So, I just recognize na I have polyatomic ions here. Okay, so yan. So, that's one step na. So, napansin ko, may polyatomic ions ako dito. So, again, ano yung sabi natin? If there is R, kung is R, depende sa dami. Kung may polyatomic ions na umuulit sa chemical equations, you have to check them if they are balanced. Balanced ba yan? Tignan natin. So, I have one SO4 here. Then, may isa akong SO4 dito. So, balance na yan. Balance yan. So, tig-isa yung SO4 eh. So, if the SO4s are balanced, ano susunod na gagawin? Huwag niyo muna sila pansinin. You set them aside. So, lagyan ko lang ng highlight. Okay. So, yan. So, huwag natin pansinin yung yellow muna. Okay. So, let's proceed balancing the remaining atoms. So, again, yung oxygen, usually, hindi siya binabalance. Nasa dulo siya binabalance. Always at the last. Oxygen is the least priority in balancing kasi. Okay. So, yung ibang atoms yung ibabalance natin muna. Okay, so since we are going to disregard the polyatomic ions because they are already balanced, tignan natin yung sodium and hydrogens. Balance natin sila. So, sodium muna tayo. So, on the reactant side, I have 1 sodium. On the product side, I have 2 sodiums. So, to balance them, I just multiply the sodium hydroxide by 2. Okay, so yan. So, balance na yung sodium. Ano sumunod? Yung hydrogens, hydrogens naman tayo. So, how many hydrogens do I have in the reactant side? So, I have 2 here. May dalawang hydrogens dito. And dito, meron tayong 1 times 2. So, dalawa yun. So, 1 times 2, 2 plus 2, edi 4. In the product side, I only have 2 hydrogens sa H2O. So that means I will multiply H2O by 2. Okay? So by doing that, balance na yan. Tapos na yan. Tingnan natin. No? Okay. So to verify if we already balance the equation, no, we check the number of atoms. No? Okay, so yan. Reactant, product. Okay, so ganun yung, ganun yung flow. You check the polyatomics. If they are already balanced, you set them aside. You balance the remaining atoms na lang. No? So, yung sodium and hydrogen. Yung oxygens, usually sa checking na lang siya nakikita kung balance. No? Okay, so hindi muna natin papansinin yung oxygens because again, they are the least priority. Medyo masakit pero ganun talaga. So, yun. So, we already balanced the sodiums. We already balanced the hydrogens. So, baka tapos na tayo. Baka balance na yan. Okay? So, check natin kung balance na. So, on the reactant side, we have 2 sodium atoms here. The product side, we have 2 balanced. Hydrogens. So, we have 2 times 1 plus 2. So, 4. We have 2 times 2 here. So, this is 2 times 2. 4 then. So, balance. Sulfur. Bilangin natin yung sulfur. So, I have 1 sulfur atom here. So, 1. And I have 1 sulfur atom here. So, 1 din. Oxygen. Tignan natin kung nag-balance din sila. So, I have 4 here. May 4 dito. And I have 2 oxygens here sa nao. So, 1 times 2. So, 2. So, 6 yan. Let's check kung sa product side balance din. So, I have 4 oxygens here. And I have 2 times 1. So, this is 2 times 1. So, that's 2. 6 then. Oops, nag-balance sila. Okay? So, ganun yung technique. No? That's the technique in balancing equations. Now, if you are able to recognize polyatomic ions, yung mga nauulit lang, no? For example, SO4 na ulit-ulit sa product side, you check if they are balanced. No? If they are balanced, you set them aside. Huwag mo sila papansinin. Ang papansinin mo ay yung mga natira. Yung sodium, yung hydrogens. Okay? So, by balancing sodium and hydrogens, balance na rin yung entire equation. No? So, to check if balance sila, edi gawa ka ng table. No? So, ganun lang ka-easy. No? So, ganun lang talaga siya ka-easy. No? So, ganun lang. So, again, yung oxygen, list priority ha. Huwag niyo ipa-prioritize yung oxygen. No? Ganun lang. So, ayan, balance na yan. We're done. Okay, so let's have number 5. Number 5. Copying ko muna. Okay, so let's have number 5. Ang daming atoms. Pero, let's see if there are polyatomic ions that are recurring. May nauulit na polyatomic ions. So, on the reactant side, I have SO4. On the product side, I also have another SO4. So, ibig sabihin, nauulit siya. No? Then, pag nauulit yan, tignan ko kung balance sila. No? Sila yung priority ko. So, checking on this, I only have 1 sulfate in here. May isa akong SO4 dito sa reactant side. But I have 3 SO4s on the product side. Paano natin nalaman na 3? Itong subscript, no? May 3 kasi. So, ibig sabihin, 3 yung nasa loob ng parenthesis. No? 3 sulfate yung meron tayo. So, since I only have 1 SO4 here and 3 SO4 here, ibabalance ko muna sila. How? So, ganito lang, no? Easy lang. You just introduce a coefficient dito sa formula with SO4. So, since tatlo to, I will multiply this equation by 3. Okay? So, yan. I-multiply ko yung formula na yan by 3 to balance the SO4s. No? Para may tatlo ring SO4. Okay, so once they are balanced, no, ano na nagagawin mo? You balance the other atoms na, no? Set aside uli natin sila. Set aside na yan because they are already balanced. Wala na tayong gagawin dyan. Ano na yung ibabalance natin? Yung remaining atoms, aluminum and hydrogen. Okay? So aluminum, I have one aluminum here. Dalawa sa product. So that means I have to multiply this by 2. So balance na yung aluminums. Then lastly, hydrogens. No? So I have 3 times 2 hydrogens. So that's 6. And I have 2 hydrogens on the product side. So to make it 6, I will just multiply it by 3. And with that, my answer or my equation is already balanced now. So ganun ka-easy. No? Sana may nakukuha kayong ideas, no? Habang ginagawa ko siya. So ganun lang. You recognize if there are polyatomic ions. No? If the polyatomic ions are balanced, then you balance the remaining atoms. However, if your polyatomic ions are not balanced, especially in our example, tatlo to, isa lang dito, then you have to balance it first. No? You balance it by introducing coefficient. So we have 3 SO4 here, so kailangan tatlo din sa kabila. Okay? Then, after balancing the polyatomics, balance the remaining atoms, yung aluminum and hydrogen. By doing that, tapos na yung problem. Okay? So let's check if they are already balanced now. Okay, so on the reactant side, I have 2 aluminums here. Ay, wala. Oh, dito yan. 2 aluminums here. On the product side, I have 2 aluminums. Balance. Hydrogens, 3 times 2, 6. This is 3 times 2 then, so 6. Sulfur, ilan? So I have 1 sulfur here, times 3. So 3. Itong S ko, isa lang. Pero again, may subscripts tell me na tatlo yung SO4 dito. Hence, tatlo yung sulfur. No? So you distribute the 3 inside. No? So this is 3 times 1. So magiging 3 din yung sulfur ko. Then lastly, oxygens. So this is 4 times 3. 4, 8, 12. Then ito, this is 3 times 4, which is also 12. Okay? So as you can see, we can balance it very quickly. No? So madali lang siya i-balance. No? So kung hindi ko siya i-explain, mabilis ko siya masusulat. No? Kasi ganun talaga. No? Pero I have to explain, no? Para makita nyo yung kalinawan sa buhay. No? Basta yun lang. No? So ganun lang. Yan. Okay, so parang easy lang, no? So hopefully, pag nag-answer kayo ng worksheet, maging easy din, no? So and just remember the techniques that I sharing to you. So may sinishare akong technique, sundin na lang kung gusto nyo. No? Option nyo naman yun. No? Pero ito yung magagawa ko ito na yung best na magagawa ko. Kasi college na tayo, maganda techniques na yung tinuturo natin, not the traditional stuff. No? Wala eh. Ganun talaga ang buhay. Pag tumatanda, kailangan mas mabilis na yung solutions natin. Paggawa ng solution. So, ganun lang ka-easy mag-balance, ha? So, hindi siya nakaka-intimidate. No? Okay, so last one. So, this is the last one. That means you're going to answer 1, 4, 6, 7 na lang. Kayo na lang bahala dyan, ha? So, pwede nyo sila i-comment sa discussion sa Canvas, no? Then, yung worksheet, pwede nyo rin sagutan. Post nyo rin sa discussion sa Canvas. No? As much as possible, maximize ninyo yung mga activities. No? Para ma-practice talaga kayo. Okay? So, yun lang. So, let's have this. Check natin if we can use the techniques. Ano yung first technique? Combustion. Is this combustion in nature? Hindi. No? So, hindi siya combustion. Kasi, wala akong CO2, walang H2O. So, hindi siya combustion. So, X. Polyatomic ion. So, OH is actually a polyatomic ion. No? hydroxide. However, sa reactant side, wala akong OH na makita, no? So, wala. So, wala. Paano yan? Hindi natin magagamit yung techniques natin. So, wala tayong technique for combustion because this is not a combustion equation. Wala rin tayong technique for polyatomics because hindi natin nakikita yung OH na nag-exist din as OH sa kabila, no? Okay. So, kapag ganun, if our techniques fail, then we have to do the traditional method, no? So, wala na tayong choice, no? Old method na lang yung gagamitin natin. So, usually, when balancing the traditional way, we start from left to right, no? Again, yung oxygen, hindi siya, sa dulo na siya binabalance, no? Least priority mo yung oxygen. Okay. So, when doing the traditional method, usually left to right yung process or depende sa gusto nyo. Okay. So, I will begin with beryllium, no? So, I have 2 beryllium here. I only have 1 beryllium here, no? So, isa lang yung beryllium dito. Isa lang si Be. So, to balance beryllium, I have to multiply this formula by 2. So, dalawa na yung Be ko, no? Sana all. Dalawa ang Be. So, yan. So, dalawa yung Be. Dalawa na rin yung Be, no? Okay, balance na sila. Next one, carbons. Okay, left to right yung aking sequence, ha? So, up to you kung ano yung sequence na gusto mo. So, I have 1 carbon here, 1 carbon there. Balance na yon. So, wala na akong gagawin. Then, hydrogen. Sumunod hydrogen eh. So, bilangin natin. I have 2 hydrogens here. Then, on the product side, I have dalawang hydrogen because of the subscript KOH. Then, times 2 pa because of the coefficient. So, that's 2 times 2, which is 4. Plus 4, dito sa CH4. So, ilan yun? 8, no? So, I have 8 hydrogens. On the reactant side, I only have 2. So, ano yung multiply ko sa 2 for it to be equal to 8? So, that's 4 lang, no? So, I will multiply H2O by 4 so that the hydrogens will balance out. Okay? So, yan. Balance na yung beryllium, balance na yung carbon, balance na yung hydrogens. Last one yung oxygen. Let's see if balance na sila. So, this is 1 oxygen times 4. So, 1 oxygen times 4. 4, syempre. On the product side, let's check kung 4 din. Kasi walang oxygen dito. Dito lang. So, this is 2 times 2. Okay, so this is 2 times 2. So, 4 din. Okay, balance na pala. Okay, so ganun lang yan. Ganun lang yung pag-balance. No? Mukha siya madali no, pag ako gumagawa. No? Pero hopefully, pag kayo gumawa, madali din. No? Dito yung 4, dito yung 2. So again, when balancing equation, it takes time talaga to master it. No? Ako kasi dati 8 years na ako nagbabalance ng equation. No? So I started chemistry yung junior, wala kasi kami junior high, senior high before, no? kailan ba ako nag third year high school? 2013, no? So 2013, third year high school ako nun. Then, college, 4 years, tapos nagturo ako, 2 years na. So, mga 8 years na ako nag-chem, no? So, yun. So, ganun ka haba yung time for me to master it, no? So, kaya may mga patterns na lang akong nire-recognize. So, yun yung sinishare ko sa inyo. No? So, I'm sharing you the techniques, no, the patterns. So, it's up for you to grab it or hindi. Kayo bahala. No? So, it's your choice naman. So, you can follow my techniques na sinare ko sa inyo to quickly answer the questions, or you can also devise your own techniques. No? Kayo bahala. No? So, free naman tayo, no? Kung ano yung gusto nyo gawin. As long as the final answer should be balanced. No? So, kailangan yung final answer natin, parehas tayong tama. No? So, ganun lang. Okay, so ganun lang. That's for the balancing equation part. Di pa tayo tapos ha? We will proceed with the last part of our discussion. Writing chemical equations from words. No? So, madali lang to. So I know in your lecture nakapag-discuss na kayo ng nomenclature. Na? So yung naming ng substances. Na? So let's just do that na. So for example, we have a word problem that we are going to interpret into equation. No? So interpret natin yung word problem into equations. So let's have this now. Calcium hydroxide reacts with hydrochloric acid to produce calcium chloride and water. So, anong gagawin mo dyan? First technique nyo is to recognize chemical formulas. Okay? Kailangan alam niyo yung mga formula. So, ano yung mga substances na sinabi dyan? Calcium chloride, hydrochloric acid, calcium chloride, water. Calcium hydroxide pala. Ano ba sinabi ko kanina? So, yan. Calcium hydroxide, hydrochloric acid, calcium chloride, water. So, let's identify the formulas for the following substances. No? So, let's begin with calcium hydroxide. So, calcium hydroxide is an ionic compound. No? So, paano ko siya nalaman na ionic compound? May ide and may metal ako. So, calcium is 2+. Hydroxide is negative in charge. No? So, to get the formula of the ions, usually nilalagyan ko ng parenthesis ang aking polyatomics, then yung criss-cross. No? So, alam niyo na yung criss-cross. No? So, yan. So, CaOH2. So, that's the formula for calcium hydroxide. Hydrochloric acid, so easy lang yan, HCl. So, we should all be familiar with hydrochloric acid. Kasi ito nasa CR to, no? Yung mga muriatic acid, HCl lang yan. Calcium chloride. Calcium chloride. So, we have Ca2 plus ion and chloride ion, CaCl minus. No? Then, we do the crisscross. Yung 2 dito, yung 1 doon. So, that's CaCl2. Water. Pag hindi nyo pa alam formula ng water, kailangan alam nyo. H2O lang yan. Okay? So, yun yung mga formulas natin. So, we just identified the following formulas. Then, ngayon, the question is, how are we going to construct equations out of this? No? Okay, so yan. Dito sa next slide, nilagay ko na. No? Calcium hydroxide is CaOH2. Calcium chloride, CaCl2. Hydrochloric acid, HCl. And water, H2O. No? So, after identifying the formulas, what's next is that you identify which of the following are the reactants and the products. No? So, in identifying kung sino yung reactant, sino yung product, meron tayong keywords. No? May keywords tayo. So, for example, reacts with. So, if you see the word reacts, meaning non-reactant yon. Yung with, ibig sabihin, kasama niya sa reactant. No? So, it means calcium hydroxide and hydrochloric acids are the reactants. No? So, reactants silang dalawa. Then, to produce. Now, when you see the word produce, meaning that's products. No? So, meaning, itong nasa right ay product. No? So, anything on the right side of the term to produce ay product. No? Lahat ng nasa right side niya, product. No? Okay? So, meaning yun na yung nasa left ay reactants. So, yan. Check the keywords lang. So, the formula is CaOH2 plus HCl, arrow, CaCl2, H2O. Okay? So, paano basahin yan? Calcium chloride reacts with hydrochloric acid to produce calcium chloride and calcium hydroxide. But, ano ba sinabi ko? Ewan ko, I'm confused. Calcium hydroxide reacts with hydrochloric acid to produce calcium chloride and water. So, yan. So, yeah. Then, again, no, it doesn't mean na if you are able to write the formula, tapos na yun. No? You always have to balance the equation. No? It is our responsibility to check if the equation is balanced. No? So, kailangan nyo talaga siya i-balance. Okay? So, ganun. Balance lang. Balance lang ng balance. No? So, yan. So, that's CaOH2, 2HCl, CaCl2, 2H2O. Okay? So, ganun lang. So, another example, methane burns with oxygen to form carbon dioxide and water. So, if you're not familiar with methane, ako, suggestion ko na lang, since not all naman nakapag-organic chemistry, if hindi talaga kayo familiar with chemical compounds, I will allow you to Google it. No? Okay? Especially mga organic molecules such as ethane, butane, propane, hexane, octane. So if you are not familiar with those formulas, I will allow you to Google it. No? Huwag na natin pahirapan sarili natin. No? Okay, so pag organics, no, since wala pa tayong organic chemistry and you don't know the formula, feel free to look it up sa internet. No? So that's okay with me, no, para makasagot kayo. Pero wag niyo ilagay yung buong question, ha. That's cheating na. Yung pwede mo lang gawin is kunwari, ano ba yung methane? I don't know the formula eh. So you check, CH4 pala siya. Kunwari, tanungin ko kayo, maltose. Biglang may gano'n, no? Maltose burns with oxygen to form carbon dioxide and water. Ano yung maltose, no? So, sa organic chemistry pa kasi yung madidiscuss, no? So, you check the Google na lang pag gano'n, no? Para makita nyo yung formula. Okay. So, anyway, so gano'n. If you're not familiar with organic chemistry formulas, then I will allow you to Google it, no? Okay, so yan. So, methane is CH4, no? So, oxygen, ito, by the way, I will emphasize on oxygen. Pag sinabing oxygen in our equations, pag sinabing oxygen, we are always pertaining to O2. Pag sinabing oxygen or oxygen gas, O2 yung formula niyan parate. Hindi O, no? Hindi O lang. O2 dapat. Okay? So, yan ha. I have to emphasize this because merong gumagamit ng O pa rin. No? Mali yun ha. The proper equation should be O2. The proper formula is O2. Pag oxygen, hindi O. Okay? So yun lang, emphasize ko lang na O2 ang oxygen. Okay? Then carbon dioxide, CO2, water, H2O. So again, keywords, burns with, no? Pag may with, meaning reactant yan, no? Magkakasama yan. To form, ayan, products yan. Anything on the right side is products, no? So, products yung mga nasa right side. So, ito, mga reactant side. No? So, the formula can be written as CH4 plus O2 arrow, CO2, H2O. Then, you have to balance it. CH4 to H2O, to O2, CO2 to H2O. So, ganun lang. So, okay, so ganun ha. So, after identifying the formulas, you check which of them are the reactants and the products, then you balance them. So, ganun lang. Okay. Na-minimize. Anyway. So, yan. So, to finalize our discussion for today, meaning patapos na tayo. So, pwede pa kayo kumain o kaya matulog ulit, no? 10:30 next class nyo. Okay. So, I will answer the following items. However, I will leave the balancing as your activity na lang. So, maglalagay ako ng unbalanced equation dito. Ay, ano yan? Ano yung nilagay? Unbalanced. So, ilalagay ko yung mga unbalanced equation. So, I will leave the rest for you to practice. So, ganun. Siyempre, mastery. Ang kailangan kasi pag nagma-master kayo ng bagay is practice nyo na lang. Okay? So, you have plenty of time naman. After this discussion, you can answer the worksheets or pwedeng magpahinga kayo. Kaya bahala na. Okay, basta i-master nyo yung ating discussion, especially the balancing. Okay. So, what I will do is that I will convert these word problems into equations na unbalanced. So, kayo na magbabalance na. Okay, so I will answer 1. Glucose is combusted with oxygen to produce carbon dioxide and water. Ano yung formula ng glucose? If hindi familiar, pwede i-google, no? So, that's C6H12O6. Okay. Pero, as you Google, no, sana may mga naaalala kayo, no? Sana nare-remember nyo, ay, glucose is C6H12O6, no? Yan, kabisaduhin nyo na rin habang nilolook up nyo yung formulas, no, sa Google. Yan, so glucose, C6H12O6. Oxygen, O2. Again, pag oxygen lang, O2 yan, ha? Not O. O2. Dapat. Okay, so glucose is combusted with oxygen. So that means, yung word na with, that tells me na yan ay reactant. No? Combusted meaning sinunog kasama ng oxygen. So reactant yan, pag ganun. Then to produce, ayan, keyword to produce. Meaning yan, anything on the right side are the products. No? So arrow na yan. Pag nakakita nyo yung to produce, arrow agad yung meaning nun. Carbon dioxide and water. Okay, so that's the unbalanced equation. Glucose is combusted with oxygen to produce carbon dioxide and water. Next one, methanol. Methanol, ito yung deadly substance na nasa lambanog na mali yung preparation. So this is deadly. Actually, if your eyes got contact with methanol, you will be blind agad, no? So yan, ito yung hatest alcohol ko sa lahat. Methanol. Pag gumagamit kayo nito sa laboratory, I know maggaganito kayo sa medtech din sa mga medtech labs nyo. Sometimes we use methanols as solvents in chemistry stuff when analyzing organic substances ng mga human serum. So sometimes we use methanol, and when you handle methanol, kailangan naka-PPE kayo, personal protective equipment, naka-goggles, naka-mask, ganun siya ka-toxic. Alcohol siya, yes, pero delikado kasi, so you don't want to mess with methanol. So full attire ka dapat dyan kasi nakabulag siya. Okay? So methanol is combusted with oxygen, and bukod pala sa nakakabulag, nakakamatay din. Share ko lang. So yan. So methanol is combusted with oxygen to form carbon dioxide and water. So the formula for methanol, if you want to Google it, so that's CH3OH. Pwede ring CH4O na. So pinagsama lang yung H, CH4O. Okay. Pero sa organic chemistry, mas better yung CH3OH. So in the future, malalaman nyo yan. Combusted with, so reactant yon, oxygen, O2, to form carbon dioxide and water. Okay, so ganun na. Oxygen, again, O2 lang yon. Okay? So, yun yung mga keywords. Be familiar with them. Last one, lithium. Pag sinabing lithium lang, pag sinabing metal lang, so ang formula nun ay yung metal symbol lang. Lithium lang yan. So, Li lang yan. Reacts with, o reactant yan, with water to form, arrow yon, lithium hydroxide and hydrogen gas. Ito pala ha. When we say hydrogen gas, H2 yon. Okay, so ano yung mga keywords natin? Pag oxygen lang, O2. Pag hydrogen gas, H2. So hindi lang siya H, H2 po. Lithium hydroxide, so the formula is LiOH. Now, if you want to verify, punta kayo sa ions. Lithium ion is Li+, hydroxide ion is OH-. So mag-criss-cross ka lang dyan. So LiOH lang din yung formula. Okay? So yan. So kailangan in your mind nag-criss-cross na kayo. Habang nagbabasa kayo ng problem, you do the criss-crossing, you identify if correct yung formula, so on and so forth. Okay? So that's the equation for number 3. I will leave that to you to balance now. Number 4. The reaction of ammonia. Again, ammonia is an organic substance. If hindi alam ang formula, feel free to Google it now. So that's NH3. The reaction of ammonia and carbon dioxide. So meaning nun, they are the reactants. Yun yung mga keywords. The reaction of ganito ganyan. The reaction between ganito ganyan. Combusted with, reacted with. So yun yung mga keywords na they are the reactants. So yan, ammonia and carbon dioxide are our reactants. Produces, meaning anything on the right side of the word is the products. The products yan. Urea. So good na lang na binigay na yung formula ng urea. Yun na sa ihi natin. And water. Okay, so that's the formula. Balance nyo na lang. Last one, methanol is formed from carbon dioxide and hydrogen gas. Okay, tignan nyo. Yung construction ng ating sentence, no, the reactants and products may also be reversed. No? Meaning, hindi always nasa products, nasa dulong part ng sentence yung products. No? Sometimes nasa unahan. So, just recognize the keywords to and from. No? Pag sinabing from, meaning nun, reactant yung mga yon. No? So, Tagalogin ko, no? So, methanol ay gawa sa carbon monoxide at hydrogen gas. No? So, that means methanol is the product. Carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide, hydrogen gases are the reactants. No? So, yan. Pag nakita niya yung from, meaning nun, ito yung mga reactants. Ito yung product. Okay? So, be careful with the sentence lang. Carbon monoxide, hydrogen gas, producing methanol. Okay, so I'm done. Tapos na. Okay, so ganun lang. Yun. So I will leave you plenty of time to practice na lang. No? So it's up to you. If tapusin nyo ngayon yung mga worksheet, tapusin nyo yung mga activities. No? So it's up to you. No? So I will give you the freedom to review today. No? Kasi tapos na yung class natin. So na-cover ko na naman yung dapat ko i-cover. So that means next meeting, we will start with our stoichiometry problems. No? Again, download the PowerPoint, no? The PowerPoint serves as your reviewer na, no? Kasi andito yung mga answers. Nilagay ko sa notes, no? Ako kasi gumawa na ito kaya nilagay ko na lahat, no? So, yan, nilagay ko na lahat. So, again, even in stoichiometry, nilagay ko na rin yung answers, no? So, yan, nandiyan na sila lahat, no? So, yan. So, you can study in advance kung gusto nyo lang. Okay? So, yan. So, yan. Nilagay ko na rin yung answers dito sa mga unbalanced equation ko. Dito na rin yan, no? So, yan. So, yan. So, with that, no? So, we're done with our classes, no? So, I will give you plenty of time to study or to sleep. Kayo bahala, no? So, yan. Just, lang, practice your lessons, no? So, practice balancing equations. You're given plenty of plenty of activities to work with, ha? So, yun lang. So, thank you very much for your attendance, no? And, yun. So, kung gusto nyo kumain, go. Kung gusto matulog, go lang din, no? So, I'll see you on Thursday. Ay, hindi. Friday pala yung next class, no? So, I'll see you on Friday again, no? And we will discuss, stoichiometry nga, no? So, yun. So, I'll see you on Friday and thank you for your attendance. So, okay. So, that's all for today, no? Sige. Bye-bye po. Ayan, so bye-bye na. Upload ko na lang sa YouTube ito, ha? So,